All right, welcome back to day 4 of Ask a Pastor, where I've taken these talking point cards, and I, as a pastor, am answering them. So we're going to give these a shuffle, and then we're going to draw a card, and I'll answer what's on the card. So today's question is, what has been your approach to reading the Bible? Has it changed over time? Um, well, my approach to reading the Bible is just simply read. I don't know how else to describe it. I'm very exegetical in the way I approach Scripture. I want to make sure that I'm understanding Scripture uh, the way that it should be understood, and that I'm making as few assumptions as possible. That I'm not importing my own ideas into Scripture. I think that those are really important things for me. But as far as reading Scripture, I usually set aside a specific block that I want to read. Now, I will say this: I don't like to read, and I realize sometimes this is very difficult. I don't like to read just part of a book of the Bible if I can avoid it. So if I sit down to read something like Galatians or Philippians, I tend to read the entire book in a single sitting. I just think that that works out better, and it doesn't take all that long. You can read the book of Galatians, the book of Philippians, Thessalonians, some of Paul's shorter letters, some of the books of the Old Testament you can read in 30 minutes or less. And so it's not really that big of a task. As I read the Bible, I tend to write down questions that I'd like answered. I think that helps a lot to just kind of record um, what I'm thinking, or questions that may come up. What did Paul mean when he said this? Was Paul referring to a specific incident, or was he just laying out a general principle? Things like that I think are really important to write down. And finally, and some people may disagree with me on this, um, I get the Bible markers and the Bible pens, and I underline, I highlight, I take notes in my Bible. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Um, and so I think it's important. What the more important thing is making sure that that we are studying, and that we're digging into Scripture. So as far as my approach, again, I try to read uh, sections at a time, or if possible, entire books at a time. I don't like to read a single Bible verse. I think it's actually not good to just read a single Bible verse in isolation. The minimum that I think we should read at a time is a chapter at a time. Although, again, if you can read more than a chapter at a time, that is definitely something you should be doing. Um, Again, this is a little bit different than when I was younger. The question is, has it changed over time? Yes, it has. Whenever I first became a Christian, I did what I told you exactly not to do, and that is to read a verse at a time. And so I would look up if I wanted to study something, I would just look for Bible verses on this, Bible verses on that. And I would just read those verses, and didn't really study the context. Um, and again, I think that was I've learned now that when I was 14, 15, 16 years old, trying to understand the Bible, there's so much that I missed because I didn't read the paragraph and the chapter surrounding that verse. And so again, that's how it's changed over time, and I've found incredible value again in um, making sure that I read a significant amount of scripture. Another benefit, and I've mentioned this in a previous video, uh, another benefit to reading larger chunks is sometimes you see connections between different parts of a book that you wouldn't have seen if you just read one chapter at a time. If you read some of Paul's letters and some of the Old Testament books, some of the shorter Old Testament books in a single sitting, it doesn't take that much time. And what you'll notice, I think, is that there are recurring themes. For example, there are ideas that are repeated. There are points that are made over and over and over, and we may miss that if we just read one chapter at a time. And so, I guess to summarize, is I read, I pick out which section I'm going to read. I read straight through, and while I'm going through, I'm highlighting, underlining. If something's repeated, I want to underline it. If something is connected, I want to make a note that points out, hey, I see a connection between what I read in chapter 3 and what I read in chapter 10, for example. Also, I write down any questions, and these are practices that I think everyone should be doing uh, as they read the Bible. Uh, and I actually did write a couple of articles about tips for reading the Bible for my website, NazareneCaffeine.com, and I'll include links to those below in case you want to check those out as well. But yeah, the entire point that I'm trying to make is that don't read a single verse, read a significant amount, at least a chapter. That the chapter should be a bare minimum. um, Look for things that are repeated, look for anything that stands out, and take notes and write down your questions, and then seek out answers to those questions. There are plenty of resources online that will help you understand maybe some of the questions that you raise. And if you have any questions that maybe you are having difficulty with, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Um, Again, I'll leave those couple of articles in the description so that anyone here who's watching can find them. But as well, I just I just want to also try to answer any questions that you may have. If it's a good question, I'll consider um, answering it, or writing an article for my website, or making a video, just depending on the situation. Um, Also, don't forget to like this video. Help us reach more people. Like this video, share this video with people who may benefit from it. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed, so that you get updates about the content that we put out. And I'm grateful for uh, everyone who listens and who hears me out on this. And I would just encourage you to put those into practice. Take notes. Don't be afraid to um, highlight, underline. Don't forget to write down questions and seek out answers. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.